Larry, talk about how badly you wanted to dance for him on television, that you got in a little bit of trouble with No Strings.
Oh, you want me to tell that story? Yeah, I just worked for Carol Haney in Bravo Giovanni, which was a shot live show. I think we rehearsed, went out of town to 2 different places, Washington, Philadelphia, whatever. Opened in New York and played 8.5 weeks and closed. And I had been doing a lot of Ed Sullivan shows, as we all did in those days, and that was the one show you could do, if you were still in a Broadway show, you could do the Ed Sullivan show and pick up an extra paycheck or 2 every month. And so time came I was then asked to replace Alan Johnson in No Strings, which was a Joe Layton show. He had directed, choreographed with Diane Carroll and Richard Kiley, Richard Rogers and Marty China's score. And so I said, sure, I'd love to. And they said, well, you have to promise us that you won't leave for several months at least. And I said, I promise, I swear. Because what I want to do is sit at a show, do an Ed Sullivan show or 2 a month, pick up the money, study acting and singing, and do that. Okay, so we'll hire you. And Wakefield Poole was the dance captain, had assisted Joe, and so he taught me the show. And the night I was to go into the show, I got to the theater early, because it was my first performance. I was in the dressing room getting ready, and I hear this PA, Larry Fuller, you want on the phone downstairs, public phone downstairs. So I thought, who the hell will be calling me on the public phone? So I went all the way from like the 3rd floor to the basement, under the stage, answered the phone. It was Carol Haney. And she said, Larry, Peter Gennaro, the regular choreographer of the Perry Como show, the weekly series, but he's out of town doing, I think it was Mr. President, but I may be wrong. Did Peter do Mr. President? I can't remember what it was. He was out of town doing some show, and maybe it was Molly Brown. And, because this was her early 60s. And I said, Carol, she said, I'm doing it for 6 weeks. So I want you to do it. And I said, but Carol, I'm going into No Strings tonight. And I can't leave this. I've promised not to leave. And I can't leave it for 6 weeks. Then I won't have anything, I won't have a job. And she said, I'll call Peter and I'll get back to you in 10 minutes. And I said, well, God, it's almost half hour. I mean, what am I going to do? And she said, don't worry, I'll get back to you. I don't know how she found him somewhere. I stayed by the phone, and within 10 minutes she called me back. This was way before cell phones, and he was out of town with something, choreographing. And she said, okay, I got a hold of him. He said you could do the season. I said, oh hell, what do I do now? It's because there were 2 musical variety shows in New York, coming out of New York at that time, the Gary Moore show and the Perry Como show. And each of those 2 shows had 3 dance couples on them. And if you got to be one of those 6, you'd hit the top of ensemble group dancing. And television was more fun because you kept getting to do new stuff every week instead of doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And so, and to work for Carol and Peter, I mean, it was like a dream job. So I ran upstairs, wrote my notice, and slid into the stage manager's desk at half hour and gave him my notice. Well, my name was really mud. I don't think Joe Layton talked to me for almost 2 years. But Wakefield Poole, bless his heart, he was very understanding because he knew it was a great job. So that was my story of how I got on the Como show with Carol and Peter.
Maybe a follow-up story about Jimmy, talking about the costumes and everything, and Gary and I and Nancy were in that. Well, at one point, late 60s, Jimmy, 68, somewhere, 68? 6 months?
69.
There was the fad of beads. So everybody in the show was making beads. And Chris Chapman was making beads. And Tony was making beads. So everybody had beads on. And what started happening is that the stagehands came to Peter and said, well, Peter, look, you know, during rehearsals, the beads are getting in the winches. So the winches are not going to work, you know, and they're really dangerous. So what you have to do is talk to the cast, tell them not to make the beads. I know it's nice and all that. Well, if anybody was wearing beads, it was Peter. I mean, he must have had maybe 8, 10 strings of beads, multicolored, and it was just gorgeous, you know. Peter was very into that kind of fashion stuff. So I remember clearly, Gary and I are standing in the back, and he's kind of riffing to the, you know, to the cast and everything. And there's 2 stagehands standing. Joe Monaco and George Green were standing stage right, and I'm clocking them out. I said, hey, check them out, Gary. See what's going on here. You know, 2 guys just standing, and their arms are crossed, and they're just. So Peter's admonishing the cast and saying, please, don't do it. You can't do it, and puts his hand inside all the beads and rips every bead off his neck. And the beads are spilling all over the place. I look at Gary, the 2 stagehands literally went like this. They kind of caved in, turned around, walked out, didn't say a word. And Peter was there, and we were just tumultuously laughing for the rest of the day. It was an uncontrollable thing. Very funny situation.